Everyone, welcome to our video today. My name is Ron Dawson. I'm the president of ePestSupply.
And
And
I'm Ted Kupfer.
hi, Ken. How's it going?
It's going good. Go ahead.
This is part of our continuing education series on Argentine ants. A few weeks ago, we did a webinar. Ken and I did a webinar on Argentine ants in California and control methods. And we had a lot of questions about baiting in the wintertime and what we should do in the wintertime as far as baiting and controlling Argentine ants. And so this video is sort of a takeoff of that. And basically, it's just some key points that we want to bring out and just casual conversation and talking about what you should do in the wintertime with Argentine ants and the KM Ant Pro system. So the first key point, and I'll bring Ken into this, is that Argentine ants have multiple colonies and will constrict to fewer colonies. So why is that, Ken?
Okay, so we're going to go to the basics on this. One of the basic reasons for this was that a lot of people, we brought up the fact that I said that people tend to look at things from a standpoint, I've got a lot of ants, now's the time I have to deal with the ants. Well, when you have an ant species that literally is the world's #1 first-class invader across the planet on 6 continents, these ants follow a cycle. And the time to destroy your enemy is not in the middle of summer when they're at their worst and leading up into September. Yes, you can fight them off because you have a problem, but if you're baiting during the winter and the fall months, they're actually constricting all of their nests back into 100 nests may become 1 nest. There was 100 or 200 nests, and there's a larger population in those nests, but they're less active. And the reason they're less active is because there's less beneficial insects and predatory insects out there and activity. So everything slows down, partially due to temperatures, but also because of the photoperiod. So these ants are sending less ants out at a much slower gait to maintain their colony, because as a superorganism species, they're going to cull the queens sometime. In some states like Southern California area, it might be late December. In Louisiana, it might be early January. The same.
What do you mean by culling the queens? Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, they're going to murder all of the older girls who have been reproducing, all of the billions of worker ants that are part of the expanding superorganism colony. And the reason they do that is because unlike normal ants that have winged alates that are literally reproducing through nuptial flights and meeting up with males, they do what is called budding the nest. They expand out with traveling queens that leave the nest, young new queens with hundreds and sometimes thousands of ants in trail, and immediately start a complete nest somewhere instead of building a nest from scratch. That's why they're a superorganism. They're able to literally expand out with nests, not just with individual queens that have to lay 3 eggs and then turn around and have one of those 3 ants possibly go out and forage and 2 work inside the nest with them.
So it's kind of like a moving caravan. You got ants that populate, they constrict, they populate, they grow their resources, and then
and every year they expand out more. That's the beauty in it. So they're able to overwhelm all of the insect species in the areas that they move into, whether it's Hawaii, California, Florida, Texas. They're on 6 continents. And the reason they did is they changed the rules in the game. I mean, we could talk about this in a scientific way, but in reality, it comes down to insects are successful that do things differently that benefit them when they go to a new location or are carried to. Most invasive ants are called tramp ants because they derive from being carried over on tramp ships, nowadays on tramp airplanes, shipments, things like that. Yeah. So if you're taking advantage of the winter months when you're seeing less of the ants, there's fewer ants going out, going back to feed the queens that are going to reproduce the spring queens that are going to be what we call traveling queens. Those are the queens that will leave with thousands of ants and spread out into more territory than even the year before. So,
You know, most people probably think that in the wintertime, ants basically go dormant or they
right,
die off, and therefore they don't need to do anything because they're basically going to be gone in the wintertime. But in the warmer southern states, that's not the problem.
no, no. In fact, in some locations, the ant activity goes up, such as for the red imported fire ant. People see more activity. It's not that they're not there during the summer, but it's that there's more than enough food sources for them to farm, just like the Argentines. They're super farmers. They literally manipulate the aphid, scale, mealybugs, and other plant damaging insects for their honeydew, the fecal sugars that they excrete out their anus. Did I pronounce that right? So they still have a certain number of those insects, and they have the glutation from the young leaves in the trees leaching out liquids in the early morning. But what they're doing is they're going back and they're feeding up the new young queens that are in the larvae stage and the males that are there. But those are going to be the queens that are going to be producing the queens that are going to be going out in early spring and doing what we call bud the nest, going off at 360 degrees with thousands of ants in all directions, and you have an instant nest. And
That's what you mean by murdering the old queens and culling the old queens.
Depending on where you are on a given day, within 24, 30 hours or so, the science says from a number of research papers, I've never witnessed it, okay? I've worked a lot with ants, as you know. I am with university studies, but the reality of it is there's this right day and right time given by their particular little environment, ecological environment they're in, where they murder the old girls because they can't travel. They've laid so many eggs, they can't even walk on their own. And in this particular case, with normal queens that we're used to, the workers take care of the queens, feed them, clean them up, and let them lay their eggs, and they live longer than the other ants. In this case, they cull the other queens because they're of no practical purpose to the colony. So when you're out there baiting and you're using many times less bait by just leaving your dispensers out, keep in mind, our initial webinar that we did a month ago, we did it for your customers, the several 100,000 or 1 million of them now, I don't know what the count is, that have been using the Ant Pro system for the last 17 years. So what we do is we try and update as we learn more, just like we do with the pest control industry. So by taking and keeping their dispensers out, if they're not in a hard freeze zone, that'll help. And the reason, Ron, is that the bait would separate out if you had a hard freeze. And if the ants are dormant in the ground in a hard freeze area, it's sort of like having a ball. There's workers around the outside of the ball, and there's the nursery and the queen inside the ball, and they're insulating them underground so that they can survive through the winter. And sometimes they even vibrate to create heat and energy. Now we have ants like the European fire ant, which isn't a fire ant, that's moving and living in northern areas of the country, that comes from areas like Finland, that we've got them starting to appear while there's still snow on the ground. So ants that we have here in this country are going to other countries, and they don't have natural enemies. And we get other countries' ants that don't have natural enemies here. The Argentine ant, as we all know, is a multi-billion-dollar problem in agriculture and in the urban environment. So that's why we focus so much time. In the San Diego area alone, 92% of all pest control company calls are for Argentine ants. Now, that ant's got to be a problem. Why I spend so many months there every year.
Really what you're saying is that the baiting needs to continue year-round, the same as it does in the spring, summer, and fall.
The ants activate the dispenser. 1 milliliter, one tiny milliliter, a little over a drop is going to feed 3,300 ants that are like tanker trucks that are going to carry the bait back, and they're going to regurgitate and feed 27,900 ants. These are research figures from UCR, okay, University of California, from the studies that we did there. And that basically, you've got a dispenser that's being activated by them that's capable of killing between 12 and 15 million ants. But it's the queens. It's all about feeding the queens. So if you're depopulating the queens that are creating Spring's traveling queens, you're taking that numbers that are going to appear in the springtime. And it's important to emphasize all of those nests that people were being driven crazy by, and some say I'm under a giant ant mound with my house. They've constricted back into larger nests with less active ants. We don't think about dealing with these ants like you have a 9-month pregnancy. Everything slows down during the cooler months. So there's still workers going out there, and their primary job is to take care of that brood and those queens that are the future.
So if you're baiting in the wintertime and you're getting control in the wintertime, how is that going to affect your baiting in the spring and the summer? Is that going to mean you're using less bait, less resources?
Lots. Because you got an ant with a foraging range of over 200 feet. In some studies, we found they were using irrigation lines. See, it's a water ant. That's why they're there. You're not going to find them in the desert. You're going to find them in the Mediterranean. You're going to find them in parts of Florida. You're going to find them in Louisiana. These places that don't have hard freezes, if they bait during the winter, they're going to use, I don't know whether it's 1/50th, but it's something like that, the amount of bait to stop the potential of all of those queens that are going to bud out with those workers. See, the workers have no purpose if they don't have queens. It's just like when you destroy a carpenter ant mound, as you know from all the years of pest management. You take out the queen and you got a bunch of meandering ants that have no purpose, and they just get lethargic and die.
So what if in these southern areas there is a hard freeze? What?
A lot of ants get killed.
But as far as the Ant Pro system itself, what would you recommend that they do for the Ant Pro dispensers if there's a hard freeze?
If they have a hard freeze, the trick to that is to shut the dispenser down. You know that it's activated, and the ants have 360-degree access. Shut the unit down, shake it. Now make sure you shake it away from you, because there can be a slight dribble of bait from the pool area up under in here. But the only time the pool area is fed is when the ants are feeding. So the bait stays up in a vacuum type scenario. So the whole key behind this is we're talking about a hard freeze being over 2 or 3 hours. Usually you'd have to have, I know here in Florida, if we went down to 29 degrees, which we haven't in like 8 or 10 years, and I'm on the West Coast, Central Florida, it's that second night where you have 2 or 3 or 4 hours that you're going to find ice. You know, around here, if it snows, you see a drop hit your windshield. You say, that might have been snow. Not like Dallas.
We don't have much snow in Dallas, but occasionally we get it like a dusting.
Right. And see, with the marine layer in California and Louisiana and these areas, most of it, they don't really get the kind of freezes that people think of in terms of sustained cold weather freezes.
Right.
You know, so leaving your dispensers out, chances are you're not going to have to go out and reconstitute the bait. Chances are you're going to go through the winter and you're going to use far less bait. And when spring comes, you're going to have far less ants to contend with, because you've got overlapping kill zones with your dispensers, as we talked about in the last webinar, which I imagine when this one goes up, you'll probably find that one someplace close to it. And I highly recommend people go to that one. I mean, we do plan now, Ron and I, to do fire ants and crazy ants and all of the different carpenter ants and stuff, because COVID has kind of put us all in a box where we're not I used to come to California and do 6 to 8 seminars, summit community centers and other things. And, you know, I'm lucky if I can see my grandkids 4 miles away. So we're here
Yeah.
now. This is
So the main takeaway from this video is that the overall advantage of baiting with Argentine ants in the winter is that there's less ants to deal with.
Save money.
It saves money, it saves resources, and you'll
Be happy in the springtime when you have less aggravations galore.
Okay, sounds
and I'm
great.
always as far as the phone, as all of you know, on all the instructions for Ant Pro that Ron sends out, everything for years. You know that if you have a special problem or you have a question, call me.
Yeah, call Ken, call me, email me. My email is ron@epestsupply.com. What's yours, Ken?
My email?
Your email.
It's kjkupf@comcast.net. That's K as in Ken, J as in Joy, K as in Ken, U as in up, P as in Paul, F as in Frank @comcast.net. And bait during the winter, kids. I had this with farmers too. They get their ant population down, and because we did research studies in crops and stuff in July, we meant to deal with 500 million ants per acre. You don't want to do that. You want to get them before they can become 500 million ants per acre.
Absolutely.
Okay, so listen, good luck to all of you. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and I hope you're able to be with your family. You too, Ron.
If you need more information on the KM Ant Pro system, visit ePestSupply.com and click on the KM Ant Pro link. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.